What is up, my crew? My name is Stephen Murphy, and you picked a dandy day to meet me here in the Nook. For this episode, I get to not only introduce you to an amazing person, but also to an amazing place. My friend Tony Gilmore is the pastor of the St. Louis Dream Center in the northern part of the city where I live. If you were to draw a 5-mile circle around the Dream Center, you would find roughly 20,000 people. And in that number, you would find dozens and dozens of people in the midst of countless struggles. Poverty, homelessness, and need. Need that so many of us can't even imagine. But in the middle of all that deficiency is a lighthouse, the St. Louis Dream Center. And the man at the helm of the daily operations is my friend Tony. He's not just a man who was hired to take care of the details. He's a man who has walked a mile very similar to that of the people he is now serving. And he does it motivated by a faith that challenges me to go deeper and further with God. So settle in for my conversation with Tony Gilmore. Just as almost like an introduction, can you give me a nutshell idea of what a typical week looks like at the Dream Center? Is there such a thing? Or and if there's not, just pick one.
Well, it's funny. It's either, I think, and probably many people can say this, pre-COVID, post-COVID, or current COVID, but for us, I think a typical week is, Sunday morning we kick off with services. And so we minister to the spiritual needs of our community and everything there. But that's like 5%. That's the 5% that we do, because from Monday through pretty much Friday, we kick into our outreach mode. And I mean, from our Genesis Men's Home, where we're housing currently about 20 some odd guys who are getting their lives back and recovering from drugs and alcohol, to the 48 kids that we have in our after school program that we're ministering to, who of course right now are virtually learning in a lot of cases. So for us, this is their only in-person interaction all week long, to the food pantry that's open, ministering to hundreds, if not thousands, some weeks, giving out food. We are constantly doing something to make the lives better of those that we minister to. So it's pretty big undertaking.
So I imagine even with the list of normals that every week looks very, very different, just based on the people who show up for any of those various things and the ebbs and flows that each one of them bring.
Yeah. I can actually tell you a story. It was one morning, my wife and I were coming in, and so we get to the campus and there's a lady laying on the ground. And she is just not in good shape at all. Looks like she was hurt somewhere in the neighborhood and came to the DC for help. And so she has some blood, everything. And so we're just getting, that's like, we just drove up. We're just getting there. And so myself, my wife, and my assistant, Princessa, we all go out and we call the police, and also Mike, our maintenance guy. And so we're all out there and we're just trying to find out what's going on with her, trying to see, are you okay? And she's just out of it because she's high on top of, her bruises.
Wow.
And that's like the first thing we saw that day. And so we have days where there are people who were bloodied and beaten who show up on our campus, from people who are just homeless and just looking for some help finding a home. And those are, I would like to say those are anomalies that happen maybe, once in a while, but it's fairly regular that we are reaching out to people who are hurting like that. And so it's not for the faint at heart some days.
Yeah, I would imagine. And I bet you that's probably just scratching the surface on some of what you have seen, and good grief, there's just need, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's so, and it's interesting because when you're not faced with it every day, you can make some assumptions on those that are in need that can sometimes be totally wrong. We have a gentleman that attends our church. He walks around with a walker. He's probably in his 60s now, and just, he's living on state aid and just isn't always in the best shape. But great guy. And so one day I had the privilege of sitting down and just asking him, hey, what's your story? What happened? How'd you end up here? And he says, I'm a graduate of Kansas University with a degree in mechanical engineering. He said around the age of 33 to 35, I was in a car accident that left me disabled and unable to work in my field anymore. And I'm sitting there, and it's like, if you saw this guy, you would just say, this guy's homeless, probably never had anything, probably never really done anything. But this guy is a mechanical engineer who had an unfortunate situation take place and didn't have the right support around him. And so he ended up living out the next 30 years in some pretty difficult situations. And so I learned early on in doing what I do that don't make assumptions about the people that are walking through difficult moments, because for the grace of God, that could be me.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, what would happen if suddenly the Dream Center wasn't there for that guy or somebody else like him?
There would be such a void in the neighborhood. And that's one of my favorite statements for churches around our nation, around our world. It's like, you can tell the impact that you're making by that question. If you were removed out of your community, would your community miss you?
Yeah.
And we know for a fact that if the Dream Center wasn't there, so many lives would go without. So many lives, from kids to adults, would not have the resources needed. Because, what people don't always realize is that one of the greatest obstacles for those in urban environments is transportation. And so it's easy to say, well, and so there's no Dream Center, so just get downtown and go get help, or just go south and get help. But it's like, well, it's not that simple.
Right.
The Dream Center takes care of this 3 to 5 mile radius of people that can get there without some of the challenges that it would take, because they don't always have transportation.
Right. And something as simple as a food outreach, somebody might have to walk a few miles to get there for a bag of groceries and then walk it all the way back home, right?
We have seen it over and over again. People walking down the street with carts. I mean, we've seen people with Shop and Save carts and the little carts they buy because they don't have transportation. Sometimes it's difficult to just load all of that on the bus, because thank God, I mean, when we do outreaches giving out food, we pack the food in for people. We really want to bless them. And so we have a lot of people that we see walking up, and we know that they'll have to walk back with that cart of food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, you said something to me. We were having lunch one time last year, and it's one of those things I'll never forget. And I was hoping that you could share a little bit of it today, when you said that there was a day years ago when you walked into the Dream Center, a very, very broken man with no prospects and a bleak look on your own future. When was that, and what did that time look for you? What did it look like for you?
Sure. So it was right around 2003. I had gone through just a lot of personal challenges. 3 years before that moment, I had gone through a divorce. And so, financially, my life was in ruins. Mentally, emotionally, my life I felt hopeless.
Yeah.
And I stumbled across the Dream Center one day as I was driving home. And it was a Sunday morning and I just stopped. And I said, I never noticed this place before. Then I walked inside right after the service was over and just looked around. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And it would be months before I would come back. But that it never left my heart what I saw and felt when I walked in that building. And I made my way to the church that day and rededicated my life wholeheartedly to God. And it was in that moment that I began to serve, because I just didn't care. I was like, man, God, you've been so good to me. I got to give you my everything. So I started serving, and they noticed me when I was serving. And the pastor began to talk to me about my future and about dreams that I had just totally forgotten about, because at that moment I was like, oh, whatever dreams I had before all of this happened for the past few years, they're done. I need a plan B. But he helped me to see God wasn't done. And in that season, the church began to heal me. God began to use the pastors and the leaders to heal my heart and restore my dreams again. And it was there that life began to take off. And then I just say, you know what? Let's go. I'm not going to be afraid any longer. I'm not going to live in my past. I'm going to live in light of the future. And so because of that, I started doing crazy faith-filled stuff, and God was just answering prayers and doing it. And one of the crazy things I did was I left my full-time job. I left a position in my full-time job that paid me enough money to take care of what I needed. I took a demotion and took a job at the Dream Center part-time so that I could begin to pursue the dream that God had in me. And a year and a half later, I was gone from that job altogether and working full-time at the Dream Center. And that would start a series of events that would take my life into a trajectory that I never saw coming.
Sure. Well, you used the word restore. I was thinking about it just before you said it. You obviously have seen it firsthand in your life that God took your mess and made something amazing out of that. Is that what you see in people now when they walk through the doors? And I'm sure you can see it in their eyes, that same lost, broken, just completely down. Do you see that in those folks and want the same for them?
I do. And I got to tell you, Steve, because of how low I was, and low is always relative to the person that's experiencing it. But because how low I felt, I fundamentally, unequivocally believe that every person with God can achieve anything that he gives them to do. So when people walk through our doors, no matter what state they're in, I can look them right in their eyes and say, there is greatness in you. And if you allow God to bring it out, you will experience a life that you never thought you could have. And I was like, I'm not telling you because I read it, I'm not telling you because of somebody else's story. I lived it.
Yeah. It's deep.
I lived it.
It's deep, right?
It is. And it's the heartbeat with which I do ministry, is that there is no cause. I got to say it again. No cause so low that God can't dig them out if they allow them. Yeah. And that if, it's a big if.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool too, because as you say that, I remember a story that you told me about some guy that had come in and he was just angry. And you told me how you pulled him aside to just ask him, okay, brother, what's going on? And he was just angry. And he said, I need a job. And while that could tell the story of 1,000 guys just like him, you didn't just take it, okay, we'll see if we can't get you a job. Right away, you could see that this guy had issues That it's like, well, we don't just get you a job. You're not ready for a job.
Yeah.
There's got to be some greater work in you. There's got to be, I can't remember exactly what it was, but you said that this guy needed some medical help. There's wholeness. It's not just checklists of, oh, get that guy a job. Oh, get that guy a box of food. No, there is a wholeness that you are looking to reach to send that guy out.
Yeah.
A completely different person, not just one who's employed. Right?
And it's so true, because I believe Romans 12:2 when it says that we can be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And I believe that we don't see with our eyes, we see with our mind. Your eyes perceive what your mind conceives. And it sounds like a cool saying and rhymes, but it's real. And so I knew that getting him a job wasn't going to change the way he thinks. Right. It would have him employed, but shortly after he got a job, if he doesn't change the way he thinks and it isn't restored to fullness of health, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, he's going to get a job for a moment, but be right back here again.
Yeah.
And so the idea was to say, hey, that's what I love about our Genesis Men's Home. Let us take you through a process of changing the way you think by renewing your mind to the Word of God and renewing how you see yourself, so that now when you go out and get a job, it's more than just a job. It's like, it's an expression of who you are as a person.
Right.
And you can give yourself to it, because now you're no longer, I think about it like this. When someone's thinking is off, there are two things that can happen. Because their thinking's off, their perception is off. So they either miss an opportunity or sabotage the ones that they get.
Oh, wow. That's good.
I knew that if this guy's mind didn't change, he would go in and sabotage the doors that we could open for him.
Right. Wow. Because how much better does his future look when you send a man who is healed, healthy, and whole into that same situation, and his perspective has changed.
Totally different. It really has. And I think about, like, women who want a husband but have been abused in the past.
Yeah.
And when they haven't allowed God to heal them of that abuse, what ends up happening is their assailant is always in front of them. Meaning whoever the next guy is seen through the lens of what the last guy did that hurt. And again, she could have a great guy in front of him, but because of the pain, but because of the pain of the past, she sees him through that lens of pain. She will miss the opportunity because she will continue to only see what she's walked through, or she'll sabotage it. Right. Because she can't really allow what's in front of her to be what it is, because she's stuck in the past. And that's how we do with life. Until God renews our mind and heals us of our past, we will end up stuck and have the inability to really see things from his perspective and launch out into the life that he really has for us.
Right. That's awesome. Another question that I had asked you sometime last year that I'll never forget, and that I just said, Tony, what's your wheelhouse? When you go to the pulpit, if somebody just put you on the spot and said, preach, what would you talk about? And your answer was faith. And that may sound very basic, very 101, but why is that the heart of who Tony Gilmore is?
Well, because it was faith that pulled me out. It was the faith that God not only could, but wanted to do it, that pulled me out of the mess that I was in. And I learned to use, because you see in the Bible over and over again, the phrase believe. Anything is possible to him that believe it. All things are possible to him that believe it. Nothing is impossible to him that believes. Yeah. And so I interchanged the word belief and faith. And one of the things that happened to me when I first got to the Dream Center is not only did they restore my faith in God, but they restored my faith in the fact that God could do something through me. And that was huge, because we believe, God's all powerful and God's, immense. But where faith disconnects is, but will he do it through me?
Yeah.
Will he do it for me?
Right.
And that is unequivocally yes. When Jesus died on the cross, that was a yes and amen forever, no matter what any of us have done, no matter what kind of messes we've been involved in.
That's awesome. Well, and because it didn't happen for you overnight, does that give you the patience to deal with the folks that show up at the doorstep of the Dream Center time after time, and maybe you're not seeing much change, but yet you're going to come back the next time and still serve that person the exact same way? How does that come flowing out of you?
It's funny how that worked, because during my process, I was very impatient.
Oh yeah.
I was just ready.
Same.
I could be patient for other people's processes, but for mine, not very patient at that time.
Yeah.
But because of how God walked me through, and that it wasn't, clearing out debts in my life. I didn't get into debt overnight. So I knew it wasn't going to disappear overnight. Clearing out old mindsets. I didn't develop some of those mindsets in 5 minutes. Some of those mindsets had been there for 20 years. Yeah. So I knew that it was going to take time for those to go through. And so when I see people coming to the Dream Center and they're continually in need of help, I keep thinking, maybe this is the time. And if it's not, I have a patience to say, as long as they keep coming, as long as they keep allowing God room, that day is going to come. And so that's my encouragement for people, because we do get impatient with the process, and so stick with it, just stay with it. It's going to happen. And so that's what I see when I come across people that are in difficult situations at the Dream Center.
Awesome. Is there a story that jumps to your mind, like maybe even from the Genesis men, just one of those great success stories of a guy who came in broken and no future, or seemingly no future, who walked out of there a completely different person?
Yeah, there's this one guy named Chad. I met Chad maybe 5 years ago. He was in the program, and Chad and I really connected over basketball. We both just loved playing basketball, so I got a chance to spend time with him outside a lot, because I hang out with the guys during the summer playing basketball. And he was really good, and I couldn't beat him. And so it was a little frustrating, but that's a whole different story.
We'll have a little prayer time at the end of this.
Thank you. I haven't gotten past that. But Chad was very angry. He was very frustrated, yet I could see that he had a very tender heart. And so our times on the basketball court turned into times where we would shoot around and just talk. And those conversations were golden, because he didn't open up right away, but eventually he would open up and tell me about his past and the things that he walked through. And we would actually take time talking about those things, and me helping him by giving him my perspective. And today, Chad, I think he lives in California now and is extremely successful carpenter, and is just really going after God. And it's just really neat to see that it took him a couple of times. He left, came back, came back, but that last time stuck, and he's been doing really well.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that there's probably dozens other stories that we could spend a few episodes on.
Chad sticks out because I hadn't beat him in basketball yet. So that's the one.
So it's really more about your pain, is what you're saying.
It is more about me right now. And my healing needed.
Yeah, seriously. Well, I wanted to just bounce back to something, because I think it's important for people to at least ponder. And that's your perception of that guy that you see on a street corner holding up a sign asking for money, or a small family that you see somewhere that it's obvious they're struggling. Why is it so much better for us to look at them with the perspective of God's redemption?
The word compassion comes to mind. One of my staff taught on compassion, I think it was a couple of days ago, and her take on it was just that. Compassion is simply entering into someone else's suffering.
Mm.
And when you look at someone on the corner and when you see someone with their signs, it's so easy to get caught up in, let me move to my next whatever. But when we have compassion, we enter into their suffering and we look. And I got to say this, when we have the perspective that if it wasn't for the grace of God, that could be me.
Yeah.
It allows me to step out of my world and really think with eyes of gratitude and say, okay, because of what God's done for me, what light thing, if it's $1, or maybe you carry lunches in your car because you run across so many of the homeless and you don't always have the money to give. So you're like, let me just put little snack bags. I have a buddy who did that. He and his family put snack bags in the car just to help, to give something to someone there. But it's really stepping out of your shoes and into theirs for a moment. They don't want to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
They would love to have some of the benefits that you have as a person, but they don't.
Right.
So they're doing the best they know to do with what they have to work with in this season. And that's one of the ways we step out of our own shoes and try and get into another person's.
That's awesome. Now, I wanted to talk to you about, at least touch on your staff and how you motivate them to take that same attitude. You know, and I've watched your staff on big days when there's so much to do and there's days worth of prep. I think about the Thanksgiving outreach when there was so much food and so much to get ready, and yet your staff and the volunteers are piling in there to do such good work. What's your perspective on a week like that and casting the vision and then see it actually happening?
I got to tell you, I wish the listeners could see the smile on my face as you said staff.
Yep.
Because I have the greatest staff in the world. And I mean that. They inspire me because these individuals, honestly, these individuals could work anywhere. They are smart. They are articulate. They could do anything, but they have chosen to give their lives to the cause of the St. Louis Dream Center. And I never take that for granted. And that's one of the things that helps me motivate my team, is that I'm so grateful for them. And I let them know on a regular basis how grateful I am for them, how much I appreciate them. And then as a motivational tool, I tell some of the stories. See, it's funny for us as human beings, but when we get caught up in the middle of all of the work and all the stuff, all the tasks that have to get done for a big event, we can sometimes get so focused on the tasks of what we're trying to do that we forget the people we're doing it for. And so I keep stories in the back of my mind that I can use to tell our congregation and our team. By the way, the Dream Center Church is amazing. The people that come and serve there, and you've seen it, you've watched it, they serve with their whole hearts, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I remind our church and our staff of those stories, of the stories of the single mom who just happened to hear about our Thanksgiving outreach. And she had no other means of feeding her family, but a friend of hers told her about our outreach. She was in desperate need, didn't have anything, and didn't even know we existed. But she came across our path. And the powerful part of this wasn't just the food that was put into the back of her vehicle. It was the spiritual food that was deposited in her as our team took a moment away from serving and started ministering. She was in tears. And it's like, those are the moments that I love to remind our team of. And to tell you the truth, I don't have to do a whole lot of motivating. I mean, I could get up and say, boo. And they're like, all right, let's go. because their hearts are already invested in what we're doing to help the community. So man, I have an incredible staff. They're fantastic. I think if there was anything that I would want people to know is that we're not trying to be like every other church. We're not trying to be like any other church. We are as unique as your fingerprint is to your hand. And so because of that, we have a very unique focus and a very unique approach to the way that we do things. Is that when people say, I want to be a part of the Dream Center, what you're saying is, I want to change St. Louis. I want to make a difference in the city that I live in, because the Dream Center is not about just services on a Sunday morning or Pastor Tony preaching or our worship team worshiping. We come together on Sunday so that we can be geared up and fired up to be the kingdom of God Monday through Saturday, and to change our cities in whatever sphere of life we're in. So not only is it done collectively when we go out and do an outreach like the Thanksgiving event, but I want the accountants in our church, the CEOs in our church, the nurses in our church, and the daycare providers in our church to say, I am a part of a church that is advancing the kingdom of God, and wherever my feet are, that is mission ground for me. I want to change my environment because of what God's changed in me. That's what I want people to know about the Dream Center.
You can probably imagine that Tony has seen people in the middle of their worst day or even their worst season. But rather than turning a blind eye, he serves these people with immeasurable joy. 1 Peter 4:10 says that God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. That's what my friend Tony does. He just serves people well. A couple of things stood out for me. The first being, don't make assumptions about people in need. I will confess that all too often, I quickly judge, and what I'm realizing about those instances is that when I do that, it allows me to minimize their needs for the sake of my own comfort level. And the more that I think about that, the more that I want to change, which leads me right into my second takeaway. Compassion is entering into someone else's suffering. If you've listened to any of my other episodes, you've heard me mention that faith is messy. And this is a prime example. When I choose to enter into someone else's suffering, I'm choosing to let my guard down and enter into their mess. And I'm convinced that when we can get over ourselves and out of our comfort zones, that this is when we can make the biggest impact. This can play out in so many different ways. It just takes an awareness. Truly seeing the homeless man at a freeway exit, seeing the older lady who just needs a little help putting groceries in her car, seeing that your next-door neighbor needs help with something and offering to do so. There may be no greater way to show gratitude for all that you have than to help someone who doesn't have it. I hope that this gives you food for thought about how you can get started to be more mindful about serving people whenever you can. I've got a link down in the show notes for the St. Louis Dream Center if you'd like to check out more about what's happening there. If you've got any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please send me an email. The address is Stephen@nookpodcast.com. That's Stephen with a V at nookpodcast.com. This podcast means a lot to me, and I hope you can sense that. You can imagine that putting it together comes with some costs. If you are so motivated, you can help by simply buying me a coffee. There's a link down in the show notes that will allow you to do that, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/the Nook and make a small donation. It really does help. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you here next time in the Nook. The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.